Hello, and thanks for joining us for Prepped and Polished Education and Inspiration. I'm your host, Alexis Avila. I'm an educator, online entrepreneur, and founder of tutoring and test prep firm Prepped and Polished, and we're broadcasting today from beautiful South Natick, Massachusetts. Prepped and Polished Education and Inspiration is your destination for groundbreaking insight from today's most influential educators, leaders, and minds on the planet. Our show is brought to you today by the Wilsey Connections, and my friend Pam Wilsey has a wonderful program that she rolled out for graduating seniors called Freshman 2.0 College Bound to help ease the transition to college. And if you want to check that out, just go to her website, wilseyconnections.com. That's 2 L's on Wilsey. And our show is also brought to you today by Plan for College Videos. College planning expert Paul Hemphill has a wonderful series of videos, over 100 of them, and his videos ask all the kinds of questions with answers that parents don't know to ask, and the frustration ends with his videos. So to learn more, go to www.planning-for-college.com /videos and get to know the Prepped and Polished community. You can find us on Facebook at Prepped and Polished, and we're on Twitter at Prepped Polished. Thank you to everyone for tuning in today. Joining our show today is foster care expert Dr. John DeGarmo. John is an author, speaker, trainer, and foster and adoptive parent. John has adopted 3 children from foster care and has had over 45 children come to live with him in his home. Dr. John hosts a weekly radio show called Foster Talk, where each week he brings you news and info in the foster care world and guests from the foster care system. To our listeners, if you have any question at any time or comments, please send your questions to radio@preppedandpolished.com. Either myself or Dr. John will get back to you. And we always appreciate you hearing from you. Dr. John DeGarmo, thank you so much for joining us on Prepped and Polished Education and Inspiration. How are you today?
I am well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
A lot of our listeners are teens. I'm wondering, what were you like as a child, as a teen?
Oh, dear. Well, that's an interesting question, isn't it? I was not a studious student. In fact, I was the student who was causing pranks. I was the mischievous one. I was the one. I never did anything that was too terrible, but I was the one who was always looking to entertain others. So I was trying to elicit laughs from others, and I certainly walked from a beat of a different drummer as well.
Nice. And who was a major influence for you growing up?
I had an English teacher, my 9th grade English teacher, and my 11th grade history teacher were both very influential to me. I also was at the time I also was singing. I did a lot of singing and performing. So my choir director, by the name of Mr. Charles Oligar, was also very, very instrumental to me.
Nice. And please share with us a little bit about yourself, maybe focus on a couple of the pivotal moments that brought you to this moment now as a foster care expert.
Sure, I'll be happy to. When I was 21 years of age, I was directionless in college. I didn't know where I wanted to go in college in regards to a career or a major. So I took a year off of college and I traveled the world in a performing group called Up With People. It's an international supergroup that traveled the world. We did, in fact, Up With People did 4 Super Bowl halftime shows. My cast, the year I was in it, we performed in Good Morning America. We were at the Berlin Wall when the wall came down. We traveled all throughout Europe, Japan, Bermuda, all across the U.S. And during that year, I met a young lady from Australia who was also touring. Though at the time, she had a boyfriend from Germany, and I was head over heels from a girl from Sweden. But the year ended, and we went our separate ways. And then later on, the Australian and I reconnected, and we soon married. We lived in Australia for a number of years, and during that time, our first child died from a disease called anencephaly, which is a condition where the brain does not form. She grieved in a healthy fashion. I did not grieve in a healthy fashion. I was pretty much in denial. Later on, we moved back to the U.S. so I could pursue my dream of a career at that time. And we did have healthy children later on. And then I was teaching English and history in a rural small town in Georgia. And I would look upon some of the students who had behavior problems, and I always asked myself, why do they act this way? And then I met some of their birth parents, and I realized, aha, this is why they're acting this way, because there's very little guidance. They're coming from homes that may be abusive or neglectful. And so my wife and I, at that time, considered becoming foster parents. And from there, led to my doctoral dissertation on foster care and several books, and that's where I am now.
Wow. That's amazing. Now, I want to go back to that, but on a side note, because I just want to make sure we cover it. On a side note, you mentioned you did a stint as a professional wrestler.
I didn't mention that, but you must have read it. Yeah, that was my dream job. I spoke of. We moved back. We were living on a tropical island in the middle of the Great Barrier Reef for a year, and it was time to move back to the States. And we moved back to Atlanta, Georgia, which is at the time the hub of what was World Championship Wrestling. Now, I never was a wrestler. I was what was known as a manager at the time. My job was to basically get in the ring and I would come out with the bad guy, so to speak. I would help the bad guy to win by nefarious means of cheating and get the crowd to boo the bad guy and cheer the good guy. That was my role, and I enjoyed it. So that's what I did for a few years in Georgia. I had not done that for quite some time, but that's what I did. So thank you for bringing that up.
Sure, no problem. So what is foster care, John? Can you explain the difference between adoption and foster care?
I'll be happy to. Thank you for asking. Foster care is a system where children, for some reason or another, are taken from their homes and placed into another foster home, to another family. And in the interim time, their biological parents or birth parents of the children try to. They have to take several steps in order to get their child back. It's called reunification. And so perhaps a child may come from a home where the child was abused, maybe sexually or emotionally or physically. Maybe the child was abandoned. Maybe the child was neglected. Perhaps there were drugs in the home. So the child will be placed into what's called a foster home with foster parents, and foster parents are trained, and they go through rigorous training. They have a house inspection. They have a police background check. They go through various other forms of training, and then the child will come to live in their home. And in the interim, the birth parents or biological parents are going through some type of treatment as well, or trying to get their act together, so to speak, so that the child can come back and live with them. And that not always happens. About 50% when the child will go back to live with their birth parents. So adoption is where the child will come. So adoption and foster care, the birth parents generally have maybe about a year to do what they have to do, and sometimes the court will terminate the rights of the parents after time has passed, and then the child is often open up to adoption in the foster care system, and foster parents generally have the first right of adoption. So the 3 children that I've adopted all came from former foster children of mine.
And what age did they come to you as a foster parent?
The 3 I adopted, one came when she was 5 days old. Her mother was on drugs, and she went to the hospital. The mother did, and she's looking for drugs. And the doctor said, "Oh goodness, you are in labor." So she came to us when she was 5 days old, and we adopted her when she was 22 months old. Another one came to us when she was a year and a half old. And another came to us when she was 27 hours old. So those 3 came to us generally when they were quite young. Now we've had children as old as 17 in our house as well. So we've had all ages.
Wow. Now, I think you already touched on this, but you have kids on your own, and then you adopted some kids.
Right.
it takes a special person to become a foster care parent to not one but 3 kids. So when did you decide that you could just keep on? You had more room in your house.
When did I? Well, it's interesting you asked that. 2 months ago, we had 11 children in our home at one time. Okay. We have 3 biological children, we have 3 foster children, and we had a sibling group of 5 children in our home. Wow. We've been doing it for 12 years now, we initially said we'd only take maybe a child or 2 at the time, and we never intended to adopt. That was never our intention. We started out, but that's just something that evolved from that.
Wow. And then over time, you brought more than 45 children to come to live with you at your home.
Right. We generally average about 9 children at a time. Right now, we're down to a very quiet, easy 7 children at the house. We have a child in our house right now who was 10 weeks premature at 2 pounds. He came to us and he was 4 pounds, and he came to us on a heart monitor.
Wow. Can anyone become a foster care parent? Is it an easy process?
No, not everybody can become a foster parent, and it is generally an easy process. They will, again, as I mentioned earlier, there'll be a police background check on you. So, if you have some type of criminal background, that may not happen for you. Mm-hmm. You have to be in good health, financially stable for the most part. And then it's just as simple as contacting your local child welfare agency in your town, city, or county or community, and going through the process from there.
Is there? I'm sure it depends town to town, but is there an overabundance? Is there quite a number of kids in need of foster care parents?
Absolutely. Roughly, any given time in America, there's 500,000 children in foster care at any given time. Yet there are so few foster parents. So when I tell you that I had 11 children in my home, that is simply because there is not enough room. There's not enough foster parents in my area to take care of them, and that's generally across the U.S. Not enough foster parents.
What's the most rewarding aspect for you for foster caring a child?
The most rewarding aspect, something I strongly feel called to do. There are times, I'll be honest with you, there are times when it is exhausting. There are times when it is draining. For example, this little baby I have right now is up about every hour at night. Feeding, and when I had 11 kids, it was full on laundry, cooking, cleaning, child care. It was exhausting, but I'd rather be doing nothing else. It's the most rewarding thing, and I feel it's the most important thing I've ever done. And that is probably because there are children out there who need a loving, safe, stable home. Children out there who have been abused, children out there who have been neglected or abandoned, and children who've never known unconditional and healthy love. So to give that to them, to be able to give that to them, is probably the biggest reward I have. To see that child smile for the very first time, to watch a child open up a present on Christmas Day when he's never had any opportunity to do so before, and to see him break out into a smile or laugh, that is rewarding to itself.
Have you found that over time, the child that you take into your house, starts, looks at you as a parent? A real parent?
Oh, yes. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. We had a child come live with us. She was with us for a year and a half, and the very first day she came to us, she called us Mommy and Daddy. But she was never able to form a healthy attachment with anybody. We had one child who came to us and had huge emotional barriers placed in front of him and would not allow us to comfort him or to love him. And then when he left after 4 months, the day he left, he looked at my wife and he said, "I love you, Mommy."
Wow.
That was amazing. Yes, we do have some who are no longer with us, but considers us their mother and their father as well.
Wow. And do you keep in touch with them?
We do. We keep in touch with them as many as we can. There are some that we keep in touch with. I'd love to keep in touch with all of them. Unfortunately, sometimes they go back to their previous home, their birth parents or family members, and foster parents may not be regarded as the good guys. In fact, they might be regarded as the bad guys sometimes because we may represent a part of their past or part of their life that they don't want to acknowledge or recognize or remember. So sometimes we're cut off. Sometimes we're able to keep in touch with them.
Have you seen an instance where when they returned to their biological, it was a good situation to return to?
We saw a situation where they went back and lived with some grandparents, and that was a good situation. Mm-hmm. We've seen some situations where they were adopted by another family, which was a good situation.
Wow. You put out a book entitled Keeping Foster Children Safe Online. Can you tell us about this book and how it helps children stay safe online?
Sure, absolutely. The book is really for anybody who has children, who cares for children. In the book, it covers all aspects of the dangers that all children face, not necessarily foster children, but all children face with online dangers. There are so many dangers today, and most adults have no conception, no clue, because let's be serious here. The internet, the technology changes on a day-to-day basis. There are games out there that our children can play that are not Monopoly, that are not Pac-Man, that are not Chutes and Ladders. Instead, these games teach children how to have sex with animals. There are games out there
God.
Yes, there are games out there where people get points, their characters get points for raping women and children. These are games that children have access to. And then there are other dangers as well. But for foster children in particular, there are a number of sexual predators out there who specifically target foster kids online, and it's a very easy process for them to do. So many children who are, for your typical foster child who is looking for only one thing, and that is to be loved and to be accepted, sexual predators realize this, and they entrap them, they ensnare them. Many children in foster care are caught up in human sex trafficking, which is becoming a bigger threat each and every year. And then sometimes biological parents or birth members may contact foster children without monitor, without supervision, without permission, and some negative things can happen that way as well. And there are many other dangers as well the book covers. It's really, I believe, it's the most important and relevant book in all of foster care today, because online technology and social networking is not a world our children live in, it's a world they inhabit, and it's not going to go away at all. Absolutely.
And can you tell us about your weekly talk show, Foster Talk, with Dr. John?
Sure, I'd be happy to. It's a funny story. This past September of 2013, I was asked to appear on a radio program with a number of some former foster care alumni who are now successful, and they asked me to appear on the show as an expert. At the time, I had 9 kids in the show, and so where would I do a radio program with 9 kids? Well, I had to go to my car in my driveway to do it so I could have some peace and quiet, because when you have 9 kids in the house, it's hard to find a quiet space. So I thought the radio interview went kind of bad because there were so many kids in the background yelling. But it went so well that they asked me to do my own show. So now every week I've got the show Foster Talk with Dr. John, and we look at the foster care news of the week and offer tips and information, and then we bring on a guest each week. The guest might be a politician, or might be a lawyer, or might be an author or a trainer or a foster parent or a foster care alumni. Just this past week we had a former foster care child who is now an inspirational, motivational speaker.
Oh, wow.
And it's an hour-long show, and then people call in questions, and it's a lot of fun.
If there is one episode that you'd want a new listener to turn to, which one comes to your mind?
This past week was a really good one with Travis Lloyd. As I mentioned, he's a former foster care child, and he's now an inspirational speaker and motivational speaker, and is doing great things with his life. And he is leading the way, helping children in care today. And we talked a lot about trauma as well, trauma the children go through. So that was a good episode.
Wow. Dr. John, the bridge from teenage to young adulthood is exciting, but it can be a confusing, it can be a daunting period in one's life, especially right before college and the next level. To any teen who may be listening to the podcast, what piece of advice would you have?
To never give up, to chase those dreams, to give 100%, to know that anything is possible. If you had told me that I would have married somebody from Australia, I'd have said no. If you would have told me that I would have appeared at Good Morning America singing and dancing, I'd have said no. If you would have told me that I would have been doing professional wrestling, I'd have said absolutely not. A doctorate degree, absolutely not. So, I was persistent, and I was determined. So with persistence and determination, you can overcome anything that comes your way.
Perfect. How can we find you, John? Work with you, order your books? Please plug yourself.
Oh, thanks for asking. There's a number of ways. You can go to my Facebook page, Dr. John DeGarmo. And DeGarmo is spelled D as in David, E, G as in Gary, A-R, M as in Mary, O. Once again, D as in David, E, G as in Gary, A-R, M as in Mary, O, Dr. John DeGarmo. You can also follow me on Twitter there. My website is Dr. John DeGarmo Foster Care. If you just Google that, it'll come up with that. And there you can also email me at drjohndegarmo@gmail.com. And I do answer all emails and correspondence. In fact, I correspond and talk with people from across not only the U.S., but across the globe on a pretty much on a daily basis. So I'd love to hear from people.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and doing and I mean, personally, I'm just inspired by you doing great work in the field of foster care. You're setting a good example, offering a home to those in need. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. It's something I feel called to do, and if people are considering the possibility of being a foster parent sometime in their life, I would be most happy to talk to them about that, and I would encourage them to consider the option. There are so many children out there who simply need someone to care for them and someone to love them.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And this wraps up our show with foster care expert Dr. John DeGarmo. To learn more about the empowering work John's doing in the world of foster care, please visit his site. It's www.drjohndegarmofostercare.weebly.com. I'm going to spell it. It's Dr. John DeGarmo. DeGarmo's DeGarmo, fostercare.weebly, weebly.com. And just like Dr. John said, you can Google Dr. John DeGarmo and you'll certainly find him. Thank you for joining us on Prepped and Polished Education and Inspiration.